As always, with anything involving the British state, there is a certain degree of sort of pomp and ceremony and political theatre. With, of course, the dramatic exit of Keir Starmer from Downing Street and going to see King Charles at the palace, followed very swiftly by Andy Burnham going to see King Charles. And really, in doing so, that really represents the constitutional transfer of power, which seems, a little bit silly, maybe looking at it very perhaps overly ceremonial, but it actually is a key part of our constitution, which historically has actually brought relative political stability to the UK. So perhaps that the context is quite important here. As you mentioned, this is our seventh prime minister in a decade. So really that is the kind of key issue at the moment. And I think really the fundamental issue for Andy Burnham is going to be to try to restore political stability in the UK. He just mentioned in his first speech in Downing Street that actually that is his number one priority. And I think really that is the thing that is going to be on the public's mind above all else.
Well, in terms of his other priorities, when it comes to foreign policy, I think the only thing we've really heard him comment on in a big way is this issue around Israel and the war in Gaza. This Israel angle. I mean, obviously, it's becoming a rising main topic, it appears, even in local, labor elections. I mean, describe where this issue now fits into the political discussions happening everywhere in the UK.
I mean, it's certainly no coincidence that this happens to be the only issue that he's really addressed. And really the core reason for that is that actually this is a key foreign policy priority for a lot of Labour Party members. And so really, I think he was trying to address some of their fundamental concerns about the UK's policy towards Israel, towards arms exports, and really whether it should have taken a tougher stance with Israel during the Gaza war. But I would say, if you look historically, Andy Burnham has actually been quite supportive of the state of Israel. He was a member of the Labour Friends of Israel as an MP. When he was running for leader in 2015, he actually promised that Israel would be the first country he visited after the election. But I think really there are so many politicians really across the West who find their support for Israel to be increasingly strained just due to events in the Middle East. And really, it's a very difficult thing for him to try to balance. But I think if you look at the statement that he made, that he issued last week on Israel and Gaza, he still was to some degree restrained. He didn't use the word genocide to describe it, which I think a lot of people will have wanted him to do. He still condemned the October 7th massacre. So I think he's still trying to muddle his way through this.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's a good, fair assessment of Burnham. Definitely not an antagonist, an enemy of Israel in any way, shape, or form coming into office. But where, I think everyone's paying attention. I mean, in terms of everyone's paying attention, what's that overall feeling, if you can characterize, in the Jewish community? I mean, targeted by Israel haters, by Iran, sleeper cells, by anti-Semites who are out there, others. Is there a way to generalize the reaction, or is it, again, more nuanced? I think you may be portraying it already in your previous answer.
No, I think it's absolutely right to really try to tap into the sentiments of the Jewish community at the moment, which are actually, deeply, under a state of anxiety and concern. And really, if you look at Keir Starmer, he became kind of, even though he actually achieved a lot for the Jewish community in terms of ending anti-Semitism within his own Labour Party and actually generally being quite supportive of Israel, even during the Gaza war, even he started to be quite unpopular with the Jewish community. And I think that really any change of hands is naturally going to be seen by the Jewish community as somewhat of a risk. And I think given that Andy Burnham did release this statement, really has caused, I would say, greater anxiety for the Jewish community. But I think really, Keir Starmer tried to actually anticipate that. One of his last major actions as Prime Minister was actually to announce a £250 million boost for Jewish security across the UK. And that is something that Andy Burnham is, of course, not going to reverse. So I think really, in terms of his relations with the Jewish community, he's going to try to continue to maintain stability as kind of Starmer created. But I think that will come under greater strain because I think we are going to see a shift in terms of the UK's policy towards Israel. I don't think it'll be one of hostility, but I think you will see perhaps greater sanctions in terms of activities in the West Bank, in terms of sanctioning far-right ministers. And of course, naturally, that will cause some strains with the British Jewish community.